Welcome back to Fishbones Fly Fishing in the Cayman Islands. My name is Davide Banks, sometimes guide and founder of Fishbones. Today we're going to do another episode of Fly-Tying Storytime where we try to make fly tying a little less boring. Let's get into it. You know, they say that luck is where preparation meets opportunity, which is why it seems like some anglers make their own luck. My old guide buddy, Ed Taylor, God rest his soul, was like that. He kind of made his own luck. He put all the little pieces together so that when he was on the water and he met that opportunity, he could take advantage of it. He was also a pretty brilliant fly tyer in his own way. Ed's philosophy was to keep it simple, that he didn't subscribe to the new fangled way of fly tying, where it's like all this hyper-realistic laser cutout, silicone, blah, 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 and everything has got eyeballs and whiskers and highly painted. It's sort of two schools of thought about what realism in fly tying means. Does it look real to you, a human being who's not a fish? Or does it act real and therefore look real to the fish? Brwn famously was on the side of the impressionistic fly. He invented the merkin, and that fly, the whole point of it, he was like, we tried all these flies that looked like crabs, but they didn't act like crabs. He's like, and we hit up on a fly that kind of looked like a crab. If you look at merkin, it doesn't really look like a crab at all, but it acted like a crab. Dove for the bottom at a steep angle, and he got over 500 permit or something like that in his life. I can't remember the number, but it's an insane amount. My old guide buddy, Ed Taylor, his flies were fishing flies. They weren't designed to catch anglers. Nobody's gonna look at his fly and go, yeah, that's a killer fly. But it didn't matter. They caught fish. And his most genius creation, I think, was what he called a carpet sample, and what I later called the Shaggadelic, after I added a few little tweaks to make it more palatable. And I think some small improvements on it as well. I'll put a link here, one of these places, to that video where I did a more in-depth version of the Shaggadelic, which I think is probably the best shallow water crab fly for fishing over grass for permit or bonefish ever devised. It does the opposite of what normal bonefish flies do, which are designed to sink down. But you take a gotcha and you throw that over grass and it sinks down into the grass. The fish are never going to see the fly, and therefore they're never going to eat it. What you want is something that sort of suspends over the grass or sinks very slowly so the fish can see it in their little window and therefore eat it. If they can't see it, they can't eat it. So one of the things that is important to note here is that when I'm thinking about tying flies, I'm often thinking about how the fly acts in the water. And many times when I get out onto the water and I fish that fly, the fly tells me how to fish it if I'm paying attention. So I might have an idea how this fly needs to be fished. I take it out, I throw it, I put it in the water, I do some stuff. And all of a sudden, it shifts my fishing. So you can have a fly that completely changes your fishing. And the first permit fly that I ever tied was like that. I was doing a lot of the stuff where you tie a fly that looks like a crab sitting on the bottom, you throw it out there, it sits in the bottom, and you kind of feel for the fish. And then I tied a fly that sank at this really cool angle. It was kind of realistic, kind of impressionistic. Almost every fish that I caught on that fly, and every fish that my buddies caught, every fish that my dad caught, every fish that clients caught, that were permit on that fly, the fish ate it on the drop before it hit the bottom. They never had to even strip. The first strip fish is on. The fly itself dictated that we do that. It was how it was built, and it was the reaction it was getting from the fish, and all of a sudden a fly can actually change your fishing strategy, which is what I love about fly tying, actually. So Ed came up with the carpet sample, which was 3 pieces of yarn, 1 feather off the end, small bead chain eyes, a weed guard, and that's it. It occurred to me after using this fly for so many years that it probably would make a pretty brilliant deep water or deeper water crab fly as well. So why not just tie it with heavier eyes and a few little modifications to give it a little bit more pop in that deep water. I also changed up some of the color pattern on it because normally if I'm fishing over grass, I'm using a little bit darker pattern because, you know, there's a lot of the theory of matching the bottom color or tone with your fly, especially for bonefish. So that's why I gotcha is a lightly colored tan fly and fished over sand. So I tied this fly in a little bit more of a tan color. I put a little bit of pop on there, some rubber legs, and boom, started catching bonefish in deep water. I think that this fly might be a contender for a Grand Slam fly. Tarpon eat it. I guarantee you can catch snook on it. I've caught jacks, snappers, bonefish, and just the other day, speaking of luck and preparation, I caught a beautiful 20-odd pound permit on that fly. And here's the story of how that happened. So my dad and I go out fishing, and it's one of those days where even though the tide is low, we're almost at dead low, it's a high tide anyway. So plenty of water on the flats, and we think, you know, we'll probably see some bones up and against the shore. We're looking, nothing. But we do see a little further out from shore, some kind of silty, muddy areas where we think, well, maybe there's some bonefish feeding out there. Now, the way that flat works is that you got the shoreline and some mangroves. You got deep kind of like basin, it's like chest deep water on that tide, that's sort of white sand bottom, and then on the outside there's a fringing flat that comes up to maybe about knee deep in that, on that tide. In low tide it's like ankle deep or completely out of the water in a normal, you know, say springtime tide. So we don't catch anything in these muds, and my dad says, I'm gonna walk back in and look to the shore where the bonefish might be close to shore. And I say, okay, that makes sense. I'm gonna take the outside. I'm just curious what might be on the outside of this flat because I've seen bonefish staging outside the flat, get ready to come in. It's the wrong tide for that, but I think, why not try it? So I wait out there, start walking. I'm probably not out on that flat for about 30 seconds when I see a giant tail pop up. Permit. Now it's blowing. I mean, 15 knots probably. Luckily, the wind is coming off my left shoulder. Make a nice long cast. I'm fishing an 8-weight bonefish fly, 12-pound tippet, number 4 hook. Fly lands right as the fish stops tailing. And I had just been watching all these videos of dudes fishing in Mexico and Belize. Long, slow strip. I'm start doing this long, slow strip. The fish starts tracking the fly hard, aggressively. It's motoring. I'm stripping it. It's not eating. I'm stripping. It's wiggling behind the fly, coming up behind the fly, puts the eye on either side of the fly. I'm pretty much out of line, so I just stop the fly thinking maybe it'll eat on the drop. It looks at the fly, takes off. Oh. But I'm stoked. I mean, I got a hard follow from a good sized permit on this little fly. Normal conditions, I changed that fly right away because, you know, there's permit out here, so I put on a permit fly. But it had such a good response to the fly that I thought, no, I'm keeping it on. Fish is probably gone anyway, whatever. I keep walking. I walk for another minute or two. Boom, fish pops back up. Almost the same spot, but tailing hard. And this time I think, I'm going to hit you with the fly. Like I used to fish permit flies. Back in the day, I found that the best luck I had was to cast the fly as soon as the fish puts its tail down. Fly lands about a fish length in front of the fish. Fish eats it before it hits bottom. That first strip, fish is on. Pretty much every permit that I've ever caught, I caught that way. Now, I know there's a lot of different ways to catch permit, and I am by no means an expert. All right, I've just gotten lucky a few times and caught some permit. But I'm just sharing with you, this is how I've had luck. So I do that again. Fish is tailing. I drop the fly about a fish length to the left of it. It stops tailing. I think I might have given it a slow strip, but basically the first strip fish is on. Now, I'm 100% sure this isn't the permit. I'm like, there's no way I hooked this permit. It has to be like a little jack or something that was following the permit that ate my flight, because there are a bunch of little jacks out there. They're rushing and grab your flight, like before you know it. So I made another strip, which basically set the hook, but I was thinking, I'll feel a small fish kind of slide away from this permit. Nope. Solid. I feel the fish shake its head. All of a sudden, it takes off. Now, we talk about luck being a combination of preparation and opportunity. Well, here's the preparation part. One, I had all of my shit together. Okay, there was nothing for the line to catch on. You know, I'm wearing wading boots, the little Velcro strap. I've got my socks down around the Velcro strap so my line can't catch around it as I'm wading. I've got a hip pack on or chest pack on, but all the straps are tucked in. I never, ever wear anything hanging from my chest. No clippers, no glasses, nothing that the line can jump on, because that line jumps up all over the place. My reel handle is on the correct side, away from where I'm clearing the line. There's a whole video about that where I get around. I'll put a link up here. But that's usually where I see people lose fish. Clearing the line jumps up. The other thing is, don't watch the fish. No, I want to watch the fish running, but you can see that in your periphery. You're looking at the line, making sure that it's not around anything. It's not like around my leg, or I haven't stepped in a loop of it, or it's not captured in like a whole bunch of sargasso or something. Watch the line, clear it, get it onto the reel. Once you get one of those fish, big bone fish or permit or something like that onto the reel, it's not like tarpon. Lots of things can go wrong with tarpon. But unless those fish wrap you around a coral or a sponge or run off the edge of a flat and cut you off, once you get one of those fish on the reel, you usually caught those fish. They basically just run, come back at you, run, come back at you, fight you, dog you in a circle until they're tired, and then you can land them. But the most critical part is getting it on a reel, and you need all the little pieces to line up in order for that to happen. You know, it starts with your rigging. You got to tie good knots. You know, again, I'm on 12-pound tippet, number 8 fly rod, number 4 hook. I better be using a good hook. I better have my knots straight so that everything is testing close to 100%. I better have made sure that there was no like wind knots or little frays in my leader. And I always check my leader. I run my finger along the leader, and if it feels frayed, I change it out, or I cut off that section and change it out. Make sure that I've tested all my knots. I make sure my knots are tested and I know that they're strong. My line to backing knot, because for sure that fish is getting you way into the backing. Make sure that's a good strong knot. Once you have all those little pieces lined up and you've practiced the drill of clearing that line, not like this. I see people clearing line like this all the time, and the handle is too close. The handle of the reel, the handle of the fly rod, and people, your hand should be as far apart as you can, and you feed the line onto the reel, and that is how you clear the line. And as that's happening, this hand, by the way, is way up in the air. Way up in the air, because I'm trying to keep as much of the fly line out of the water as I can, because a lot of those fish run with their head down, trying to find something to get you around. I've seen permit bumping their head on the ground. This one did it. This one did it at the end. It tried to rub me off on the bottom. I can see the fly hanging in the mouth. It tried to rub me off on the bottom. So keeping the line up high, as much of the fly line out of the water as possible, so there's less drag. That means there's less chance you're going to break the fish off. Nice loose drag. I set my drags for 12-pound tippet, the way that Lefty Craig talked about for bonefish. I set the drag, I take my lips, put it around the fly line, and pull. And if I can just barely pull off line with my lips, that's probably about just enough pressure to fight a fish, but not so much that you're gonna break him off when he rockets off, or when they hit the drag. If the drag is too hard, you're gonna break him off. Or if the fish is dragging 110-foot 8-weight fly line through the water and it's trying to go sideways, you're gonna break him off. So it's just having all those little things line up, and that's your preparation. And if that hits the right opportunity, well, then you get lucky, like I got lucky. Anyway, fought that fish for about 20-25 minutes, landed it on that little fly, and I'm gonna show you that little fly today. So let's get into it. So we're gonna need some rubber legs, some yarn. This is Derice yarn, which you can't get anymore. But you can also use just the Antlidia sparkle yarn. Need some Grizzly Hackle, some Salmon or shell pink Marabou, some extra small Dumbbell lead eyes, 1/50 of an ounce. You could also use smalls if you're fishing a little deeper water, but this seems the perfect weight. It doesn't sink too fast, not too heavy, but it does flip and invert the fly. That's pretty critical. And finally, we're gonna need some hooks. I'm gonna be using Mustad big game hooks because I have a bunch of those still laying around. You can't really get these hooks anymore. So what you're gonna probably wanna grab is the Mustad Heritage Fly Hook Alpha Point. In a number 4. These are brilliant. They have an ultra smooth coating on them that allows penetration. And the first thing that we're gonna do is use our vise and debarb that hook. We don't need it to have a barb. Next thing we're gonna do is throw down some few wraps of Gotcha pink thread on here. I love these scissors, by the way. These scissors I can just hold in my hand, so I don't have to like put them down, and I think that they're perfect for all this. The first thing we're gonna add is gonna be our Marabou, and we're gonna add that as a little tail. Find one of the feathers, all right? Pull that feather out, and I'm not gonna use all of it because I can get 2 out of this one. I'm gonna cut it about halfway. So I've got that left, and then that I'm gonna pull back. And I tie that, it's gonna be about the length of the hook sticking out the back, all right? Not much more than that. 2 or 3 wraps to secure it. Like I said, this is super simple fly. I'm gonna lock that in, wrap my thread back up. Now, one of the things about adding rubber legs that is a pain is if you lock in your rubber legs too tight. Again, I'm using these, I think these are Chicone, Chicones. I don't know how you say his name. His little bone crusher legs or whatever. This is just the barred brown and clear. Seems perfect. But one of the things about putting in any legs is if you crank down on them, you'll kind of cut through them, and then you'll lose a leg. Here's a fly where you can see that it only has one leg still on it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in. I want this to go a little bit past the tail, but not much. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thread and spin it. Now that's going to unwind the thread and flatten it out. That flattening is going to keep the thread from cutting through it as easily. So I make a nice loose wrap, make one more. So it's on one side of the hook shank. Now I'm going to fold this back up over top and tie it in on the other side. What I'm going for when I lock this in is a kind of V shape. I pull both to be slightly longer than the tail. Cut it. So now you can see that they're at this V shape like that. You want them splayed. When you strip the fly in the water afterwards, you'll see that it gives a nice kicking action. So now what we want to do is we want to add in some yarn. Now there's a ton of different yarn colors out there. You know, this would be a great combo. Brown and olive would be a great combo. Brown and tan, olive and blue, all those are great. But I'm just going to go with straight tan today because this is just a simple tan crab. I tie it in on the inside of the hook bend because this fly is inverted, and this material, being nylon, has a very slight amount of buoyancy that will help invert the fly. I just make some figure 8 wraps over it. 2 or 3 seems to be sufficient. And now I'm going to wrap up toward the eye of the hook about an 1/8 inch. And I'm going to make my my strands of yarn be about an 1/8 inch apart. Now that's kind of critical. You don't want to pack it on there. A lot of people I see tie in crab flies with yarn or other kinds of sliders that have a similar body shape on the fly. They pack everything way too tight and the fly won't sink. You don't need to make it be solid. It just has to appear solid. You see this fly here? The eaten one? This is the exact fly that I caught that permit on. This fly looks like it's a solid mass, but it's 3 pieces of yarn. So, like another trick that you could do here, another nice color pattern, and you can kind of see that on this fly here, is you could take a little bit of shell pink yarn, if you can find it, and put that in the middle. But like I said, I'm just making a simple, this is the OG, simple standard tan crab fly. Like I said, about 1/8 inch apart for every one of these strands of yarn. And I only need 3. You'd be surprised at how much this fills up and fills out as soon as I put the stuff in. So now I'm gonna invert it and I'm gonna tie in my eyes. I'm gonna put down a little base of thread by opening the thread again, unraveling it. So I'm gonna use extra small lead eyes. On this one, I'm gonna use the ones that are just unplated, but you could use silver. One of the tricks that I do to get it to sit right is I use a pair of pliers like these. I hold and I pinch it very gently. What that does is hard to see, but it indents right here. It indents into the lid and makes a little flat spot for the shank of the hook to sit. As always, when I tie in my eyes, I start with them at a 45 like this. I make a few wraps out of 45. And now what I'm gonna do is I take my finger, push it back this way, and start wrapping the other way. Now what that does is it pulls it back. As you can see, now it is perpendicular to the hook shank. And what that does is it takes those first few wraps of thread and tensions them really tight. And it helps keep this thing on here without twisting. And if you need to, you can take a few wraps underneath. I don't really do that a whole lot, but you can. Now I'm gonna trim it before I put in the palmered hackle. Trim it bigger than you think, but try to trim it even. Then you can take a little comb or a little piece of Velcro. I like to do this before I put in the other stuff, because if it's not even, then I can trim it. So like this is not quite even. I like to make a little taper shape. So there we go. I got a little tan body that's pretty even and pretty round. And you can see how that really fluffed out once I combed it out. And now we're gonna tie in our little grizzly hackle. I don't want any of the white stuff, so I trim it off. I could just strip these off. I like to trim the little barbules, and it gives me these little, I think it helps grip. Stick that there, make a few wraps. If you look here, I'm collecting that little wrap underneath here. Okay, so now I'm gonna make about 2 or 3 wraps around here to make a palmered hackle. When I'm doing this, I'm pulling the material of the barbels back toward the bend of the hook. That's probably good. I bring this up vertical. And now I'm gonna wrap behind the eyes on top of that. Once I get 2 or 3 good wraps, try to trim it without trimming any of the palmered hackle. And now I've got enough, I can make another one. And we're ready for the final element, which is a weed guard. Weed guards are pretty simple. I like mine super simple. I take this, pinch it, maybe it's like 20-25 pound test, pinch it in my pliers and bend it back. Now I've got a little serrated area that will lock in the thread so it won't pull out. It means I don't have to use any glue. Trim my mono slightly longer than the hook point. Use my thumb and push it up. Wrap behind it, make a lock. Wrap behind it, make a lock. I'm trying to build up some thread right behind that piece of mono, and I keep testing it. I don't want it to be perfectly upright, but I want it to be enough where I know that it won't catch weeds. Once I think I'm good, I will once again spin my thread, because I find that when I do my whip finish, flat thread, not round thread, finishes better. It makes a nicer, smoother head. If I'm gonna fish this for permit, I might not use a head cement finish because I, worried about their sense of smell. So I'll do 2 whip finishes, 3 to 5 wraps. And there you have it. That is deep water Shaggadelic fly in a simple tan that has to date caught big bonefish and big permit. Takes you about 5 minutes to tie one of these, maybe 10. Looks like a crab to the fish apparently, acts like a crab. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay salty, my friends.